On this transition, on the developing a process to client institutionalization, what could be the steps that you think law firms need to take to make it happen?
There are a number, I think. A lot of it goes, so as you were saying, the client focus is around the lawyer. I think that's a 50, so that depends. So quite often it is. Some of the firms that are more developed have got much better at institutionalizing the brand of the firm. So they're an ex-lawyer, they come from X firm, or that this firm is the firm in this space. And so anyone who's from there is likely to be good. That goes back, I think, Tony, to your point about quality. And there are issues about how firms maintain that quality now in a new environment. I think there's also a point about having those clearer conversations with the client to work out what it is they want. Because as lawyers, there's always an assumption that they want the absolute Rolls-Royce service. And we'll talk about, risk elements here, but actually sometimes good enough is good enough for clients. But you won't know that unless you have a conversation with the client. If you assume that it always has to be a certain way, you're setting yourself up to not deliver the service the client wants. And I think the third point I'd make around clients is clients also read the legal press. So they know that law firms are coming off 2 years of record-breaking profits and profitability. And they're thinking, well, ultimately, who's paying for that? And so how does the firm address that perception with their client base?
I think that's a really important point, because we're seeing law firms who are facing real margin pressure. Clients, as you said, they see the PEP figures, they see the profitability figures, and they say, right, we'll push down the margins, we'll push down the fees, we'll pay slower. At the same time, they're seeing the cost of people recruitment going up. We're seeing the real war for associates, a war for NQs, and a war for partners. So those costs are going up, the fees are potentially going down, and we're going into a period of globally slower growth. So the question for the law firm, how do you sort that out with the clients? And your point about planning with the clients, being open with them, will actually really pay dividends, both in extra work and in understanding what they really want. And do they want their associates to be working all night, to be delivering an answer within 6 hours? Or actually, are they happier with a 24-hour position and a more people-orientated approach to client delivery? But law firms are getting into a situation now where the last 2 years are not a guide to the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And that issue of changing in the way that clients are serviced, the way that clients' needs are understood, and people who can really stand in the client's shoes, and then translating that in the right thing for their people and the right thing to deliver their strategy.
I think coming back to your original question, Mary Cruz, was that the point about law firms, really, the starting point for this is they have to understand their cost of production. Yeah. Everything else, you cannot plan without knowing how much it costs you to deliver what kind of service. And there's all sorts of things they can be doing, and we can get into those later on, but that's the basic, the absolute basic.
Mary Cruz, I know you've been working with a number of law firms on how to get partners to collaborate when they go and develop stronger client relationships. What were your takeaways from that in terms of what works well and what doesn't work?
The sector approach has worked well in law firms that they're not used to collaborate. So in many cases, they haven't looked at the data in detail. In many firms, they don't understand the type of clients they have and what are the lines of work that they're doing. So in a way, they have a track record of industry knowledge and they're not aware of it. So from the work we've done, at least you identify 3 key sectors. You look at the market opportunities and you say, okay, should we create teams? So when you create teams, I think we've noticed that mixing partners with associates is crucial. And in many occasions, and we talked about skills and skills development, but some partners find very difficult to be rainmakers. And they're already in a position that they're not really achieving their aims and objectives. And if it's not a law firm that they're very good at assessing or evaluating partners, they're there. So it's how do you invest to just give them the skills in order to build on sectors that they're not being well developed. And that has worked really, really well.
The key thing from the client side is getting partners who don't just go along and try to sell their particular practice, whether real estate or corporate or tax, but who really stand in the shoes of those clients, understand not just what they want, but what they need, and deliver that using the whole firm. And the best relationship partners I've seen are brilliant at that. But other partners, this doesn't come naturally. And that's where you need that training, development, and a process to enable those brilliant lawyer partners to stand in the shoes of their clients, understand them, make heroes of those clients within their firms, and really move the relationship on.
So these groups are really hard to make them work if the compensation or remuneration is linked to origination or is linked to elements that could make them compete internally for the clients. That could stop them from collaborating quite clearly.
So that could take us to the question really about to what extent do law firms get the behaviours they need in this world we're talking about, or the behaviours that they financially reward. And how many of the law firms we work with are very guilty of saying we want collaboration and certain types of behaviours, when in fact the financial rewards are aligning their partners in very different ways.
I think that's absolutely spot on, because if you create a system of partner development, of partner review, and which is linked into the clarity of where the firm wants to get, you can get partners who understand that they are personally going to be rewarded on not just what they deliver financially, but what they deliver for their people, for their clients, and in leading initiatives to improve the firm long term. And that also begins to move the partnership focus away from this year's PEP and maximising that, and we've all seen how agile the partnership can be within that 1 year, to thinking about the long-term value creation in the firm through creating better people and enabling and bringing that potential out, to really developing the clients for the long-term benefit of the firm, and to lead initiatives, whether it's on risk, whether it's on technology, that will really deliver value to the firm long-term.
Having clarity on, if you like, a dashboard of obligations is very important. So, for example, yes, obviously the partners need to be fantastic lawyers, that's a given, but they also need to be great managers. And I think there has to be this broader vision about what's expected. They have to manage their business, think about strategy, they have to think about finance, they have to manage their clients, winning clients, developing clients, retaining clients. They have to think about their people from recruitment through to departure. And they also have to think about risk. And I think thinking in those broader terms is something which will help an organisation, a firm, develop in the right direction if it's linked to the strategy, if it's linked to the sectors in which they operate, if it's linked to the demands of their particular set of clients.
The idea of a dashboard is brilliant. The idea of a framework across which all law firms or partnerships need to come to an agreement around what the minimum expectations are, because not everyone is going to be a brilliant lawyer, a brilliant manager, a brilliant BD person, all over the IT. They're not. People have strengths, but there's got to be a minimum expectation. So we want our lawyers to have a minimum expectation of legal quality, we'll have a minimum expectation of management, we'll have a minimum expectation of how much business they generate, etc. And if everyone builds into that, then you can push some of that back to, or allow the partners to say, well, actually my interests are in this area. As long as I keep this steady to the minimum level we've agreed, I can really focus on the things that I really am enjoying. So it might be managing my team, or it might be creating more knowledge, or whatever it is.
I think that's right. If I can use a rather simple illustration, it's a bit like your hand. I've got a number of strengths and a number of relative weaknesses. So if I've got a partner who is complementary, it's a much stronger bond if we can work together and balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. I think that's absolutely right. And having that dashboard and clarity of the dashboard is essential. I absolutely understand that that's something of an ideal world because you have who you have, but at least thinking in terms of what are the range of strengths in our group, where are the weaknesses, how can we address those weaknesses or compensate for them, is a fundamental part of any management process. One thing which I think is interesting about the team approach, the collaborative approach, is that it is important to give the associates a bit of freedom. There's a lot of research, and we've looked into this, that indicates that if you give associates a degree of authority, autonomy, obviously within the scope of being properly supervised, that is very motivational. And not only is it motivational for them, but they will contribute more, they will support the partners more and take the burden off the partner's shoulders. It may be an obvious thing, but it's something which in the heat of a deal sometimes can be overlooked.
And then one thing that our research is showing, one of the unforeseen consequences of COVID, is that law firms have communicated better and included their younger lawyers much more in their firm management over the last 2 years. So there's a number of managing partners have said to me, it used to be the partners meeting was the most important meeting I had to prepare for. Now it's the town hall with all of the associates. So it's no surprise that now when we talk with firms about developing strategy, we will typically include all of the associates. We've got an event coming up with 500 associates in a firm when we're trying to work out some of these issues. But we have to flag those firms that are going back to the old habits. So whereas people felt clarity about, now we see in some firms, partners are back in the office, whatever that means to be back in the office, and they've got their doors closed. So firms have to be more aware of how do we want to communicate, what does that look like, and try and learn from some of the positive aspects we've seen for the last 2 years, instead of just going back to business as usual.